In this video, we're going to talk about the process of importing a spreadsheet of contacts. So first place we're going to go once we open our account is to Contacts. And then you can see up here in the upper right-hand corner is a button for Import. If you were to click on Add a Contact, that would take you to a section of the system where you can manually add them individually, but in this case, we're talking about a spreadsheet. So by clicking on Import, it's going to give us a few different options here. The one that we're going to use is Import from File. Now, before we do that, let's take a look at the spreadsheet that we're trying to bring in. So we need to make sure on this spreadsheet that we have columns with headers. That way the system can identify what type of information is in that column. And then we need to make sure that everything is in here in the format that we want it to be imported into the system. Something to mention as well is that the system can only import spreadsheets that are in CSV file format, so you'll need to make sure that it is saved that way. So for example, I have this spreadsheet open right now in Apple Numbers. I would need to go ahead and export this to CSV, give it a name, give it a place that it's being exported to, and then export. So now we have that sheet ready to be pulled into the system. So now I'm going to click on this button that says Import from File. And if I go to my desktop, you can see here we have sample data for Sandbox. So because we had columns with headings, it's able to identify each of the columns on the spreadsheet, and then we just need to map which field we want that data to come into within the CRM. So usually it already pulls out first name, last name, and email address, and it's up to us to assign the rest. So for example, here, company name, that's going to be their agency. And we're going to store all agencies in account. Address is going to be the agency's address. And so in this case, we had it broken down. So we can do address 1. We have our city, so agency's city. We have state. And then we have zip code. Phone 1 is going to be the mobile number. And so we're just going to put that here in phone. As I mentioned, email address is already pulled over. And then if we have any other specialized fields, such as information that we're getting from our scheduling system, which in this case doesn't really apply because we're talking about prospecting, but we could find those fields here as well. So for example, number of inspections as BA year to date, we would just find that field and select it. Now let's say, going back to the prospecting example, these other columns were the number of transactions they've done within the last 12 months, and we don't currently have a field set in the CRM to record that information. We could come down here and choose this option for Add New Field. Now you can see we have a few different selections here. In our case, we're talking about number of transactions in the last 12 months, which is just going to be text input because it's going to be a simple number. We could also choose text area, which allows multiple lines, a date, a drop down with few options, a list box, radio buttons with a few options, same thing with check boxes, or a hidden field. Now in this case, we're going to do text input, and it wants us to give it a name. So let's name it number of transactions as BA, so buyer's agent, let's say past 12 months, and then we can save. And so now you can see it's automatically assigned that column to this new field that we've created, and this new field will be stored in the system that we can use moving forward. So let's say now we have all of our fields mapped over that we want to map over. Any extras that we don't want to import, we can just leave as do not import this field. Now it wants us to select a list. One important thing to know about the CRM is that in order for a contact to receive any kind of email from the system, they have to exist on a list. So if this is a group of agents that you want to import into the system because you want to start sending them marketing emails, you're going to have to assign them to a list as well, even though it's optional. So in our case, we already have a list created for prospecting, so that's the one that we would choose here. If you don't select a list, it will still pull them into the system, and you can always go back and add them to a list later. But if you don't select a list, you don't add them to a list, but you add them to an automation that includes email steps, they will still progress through that automation. They will just skip any email steps and will not receive that email because they're not on a list. We can also add tags. So you may want to add a tag that gives you more insight into where this prospecting list came from, or what type of agents are here, or when they were imported into the system. Anything that may help you identify. So let's say, for example, you have a specific county that this list is pertaining to, and you want to add a tag for that. You could just go ahead and type that in. And then if I click out of that, you can see here it's now going to apply this tag Wake County to all of the agents that we're importing from this spreadsheet. The benefit of adding tags is in the future, let's say I wanted to send another campaign to any prospecting agent who is in Wake County. But at this point in time, I've now added many prospecting agents to this list from a bunch of different counties. By having this specific tag, I can then filter down those future campaigns to say they exist in the prospecting list and they have the tag for Wake County. So just keep that in mind. Tags can be used as unique identifiers, and it may help you in the future if you're going to want to send specific communications to people with that tag. We want to always import them as an active contact. So if we choose anything else other than active contact, and then we add them to an automation that includes email steps, once again, they're going to skip over those email steps because we did not import them as active. So always leave this as an active contact. The last option that we have here is a checkbox for update existing contacts while importing. Here's a way to explain what this checkbox does. By checking this box, it essentially is telling the CRM if a contact exists on this spreadsheet and they already have a profile within the CRM, update any information on their profile that may be new from this spreadsheet, as well as update a list if we chose that here, and add any tags if we enter them here as well. So it's basically saying take that existing contact in the CRM and just make sure they're up to date with whatever information exists on this spreadsheet. Whereas if we leave this unchecked, it's telling the system if they exist on the spreadsheet and they already exist in the CRM, skip over that row in the import because we're not going to want to update any information that currently exists in the CRM. So it's not going to pull in any of that new information. It's going to pretend like they don't exist on the spreadsheet and just move on down to the next contact. So to give a couple of examples of where you may want to check this or leave it unchecked is, let's say you just did a CE class or you just did a presentation and you're importing a spreadsheet of agents who attended that CE class. And you have a follow-up automation built out that sends them an email that thanks them for their attendance, as well as just continues to stay in touch with them. In a case like that, even if they're already working with you, or even if they already exist in the CRM, you most likely still want to send them at least the thank you email, as well as check to see if they work with you after that presentation. So in that case, you would want to check this box because you would want to make sure that any new information like the presentation name or the presentation date gets updated on their profile, and they also get entered into that follow-up automation regardless of if they're working with you or not. But coming back to our prospecting example, let's say that this spreadsheet that we're pulling in has some agents on it that we may already be working with. And because we're already working with those agents, we don't want them to go down this prospecting process because now they're going to get emails that say, hey, we'd love to earn your business, when in reality, we already have their business. And that would create a disconnect in communication. So in that case, we may want to leave this box unchecked to tell the system if they already exist, we don't want to put them into this prospecting category because we're already working with them. So skip over them as part of the import process and move on down to the next agent on the list. Once we're done checking these options, which I'll go ahead and check this box, we can go ahead and click on Import Now. Now you can see it's going to take us to a screen where it shows us a percentage as far as the progress goes, says the import's been started, and it says we can monitor the progress here, or we could leave this page and let it run in the background and just check in on it later. So sometimes, depending on how big the spreadsheet is, it can take many minutes for the import to finish. In this case, we only had 2 agents, so it was pretty quick. And then we have a few different menu options here. What I usually like to do is just view the report and then get a summary as far as what happened with this import. So it found 3 total items, it imported 2, and it didn't import 1. There was 1 failed row. Now that 1 failed row was our heading row right here. So we had 2 rows worth of data that could have actually been pulled in, and it looks like both of those rows of data were pulled in successfully. So at this point, we could now move on and we could create a campaign to send out to this group of agents. We could make sure they're entered into a prospecting automation that we've built out, or we can import more contacts if we have additional spreadsheets to pull them in.